Hi, welcome to SBR Sports Picks. I'm Peter Loshak. Today is Wednesday, July 12th, and I'm starting in with my in-depth college football research right now, and I'm going to be previewing, hopefully, every conference in college football leading up to week one and sharing them with you all. And we're going to start right now with my thoughts on the Pac-12. This is just going to be a general overview of the key points for each team to consider and the ways that I'm going to be thinking about looking to bet them in terms of sides and totals throughout the season and certainly in the beginning weeks. Let's start with Cal. And Cal, of course, a very interesting team. Sonny Dykes is gone. So, and the defense, of course, has been awful for Cal recently. So the question here is how effective will the change in coaching staff be as far as on-field results, and when will that happen? Cal is pretty clearly a team that's building for 2018 and beyond. So this is going to be a little bit of a throwaway season for them. So how will the market react as far as their totals are concerned, as far as their spreads are concerned? Obviously, there is some talent on this team. Of course, there's some experienced guys returning on defense, but it's looking like the offensive line is going to be overmatched. And I'm thinking that they're going to change things around on offense and not be nearly as productive on offense. Still be vulnerable on defense. Probably a significant improvement on defense, but that's not saying much. So to start off, I'm going to be looking for maybe actually unders with Cal, despite the fact that they're defense has been so bad. Of course, it depends on where the totals are, where they are placed, where they're priced in the beginning weeks of the season. But we might see an improvement on defense, and for sure there's going to be uncertainty on offense, and they're probably going to be go with a more conservative approach on offense, and also be relatively ineffective with the pieces that they have involved, and the offensive line that's probably going to be again overmatched against Pac-12 defenses. So not clear what to expect from Cal to start, but I'm going to be looking to fade them, even though expectations are low. I'm going to be looking to fade them to start the year, and maybe as some things start to gel, some ATS wins much later on in the season if they start off the year terribly and the market adjusts, and right as they start to make their improvements, the market adjusts in the opposite direction and starts giving them more points on their spreads. But to start the year, I'm thinking about fading them and also maybe looking for unders depending on where the totals are set. Then the next team we're going to look at is Oregon, and Oregon, of course, comes in with huge question marks, more uncertainty than any Oregon team in recent memory. New coach is Willie Taggart, and there's definitely an energy surrounding the program now with Taggart in there. The question is, what will we see on the field? Of course, defense has been the big liability for Oregon recently. They do have a new defensive coordinator, and he has a track record of making improvements with the teams that he takes over. But it's not clear if he's going to be able to make improvements exactly this year. On the other hand, Oregon is going to have one of the most experienced teams in the country. They have 17 starters coming back, and one of those is going to be the quarterback, Justin Herbert, who was a true freshman last year. He showed great results and potential last year, and he actually finished third in the Pac-12 in passer rating behind only Jake Browning and Sam Darnold. So, of course, Oregon always recruits well. They always have a lot of talent on the field, no matter what the psychological state of the team is, and no matter who the coaches are. So they might actually be a good bet this year overall upcoming, considering that the expectations are going to probably be significantly reduced in light of how things went last year. So I'm thinking about maybe looking for overs and maybe to bet on them ATS. I could easily see them being undervalued, and I could easily see their offense actually being a lot more productive this year assuming Justin Herbert plays as well as or better, makes an improvement from last year, and assuming that he remains healthy, of course. But Willie Taggart is a great coach who has orchestrated turnarounds. Of course, his turnarounds in the past haven't necessarily come instantly, but he also has never worked with the talent that he's going to be able to work with here with Oregon. So it's not entirely out of the question, much like we saw with USC last year, that there could be a very, very significant improvement from Oregon that could come as soon as the middle of the season, or even after week 4 or week 5, something like that. So there's a lot of question marks surrounding Oregon and a lot of positives. And to start off, I'm thinking about looking for overs with them, and maybe, depending on how the market prices them, some ATS covers. The offensive line was not good last year, but they return a lot of experience, and if the offensive line makes a big improvement this year, then the offense in general might make a huge improvement, and that might result in ATS covers and overs from Oregon. Then we're going to look at Oregon State, and Oregon State is an interesting team. Of course, for a long time they were the doormat of the Pac-12, and they are definitely improving. It's a slow improvement. Of course, their recruiting is not on par with the blue bloods of the Pac-12, but they are definitely making slow and small, but definitely steady improvement, and that could at some point result in them being significantly undervalued for a stretch. Gary Anderson, of course, is the coach. He's in his third season, and they are kind of like rebuilding in the same way that Gary Anderson rebuilt Utah State in the early 2010s, and there are some positive signs. There's a lot of quarterbacks in the mix here, and there's one guy who's a new guy coming over from Idaho and a community college. He's 6'7", and there's some hope that he might give them a big boost in the passing game, and if that happens, they might take a quicker than expected step forward. If he flops, then their improvement might be a little bit slower. But pretty clearly, they're improving, and injuries, as always, are going to be key. They don't have a lot of quality depth, so if they get hit with injuries early on, especially on defense, that's going to hurt them a lot more than it might hurt other teams. But in general, things are looking up. There's more playmaking potential than there has been for Oregon State in recent years, and just in general, they were more physical, athletic, and generally competent last year than they were in previous years, and things are looking slightly up. So I think things are looking pretty bright, and I'm going to be watching and waiting cautiously, but looking for them to possibly have line value if they stay healthy, and if they gel and get some cohesiveness on the team, and if the market gives them decent points, which I think will happen at some point. It might not happen this year. It might happen in 2018, but it also might happen this year. That's something I'm looking out for, and I'm looking out for Oregon State to maybe have some line value at some point, significant line value at some point this upcoming season. Next, we're going to look at Stanford, and, there's some changes with Stanford. Of course, no more McCaffrey. I think in general, we should expect roughly the same from Stanford as we've seen in years past. Slight differences in various places on defense and offense, but in general, still a team with a strong offensive line, a great defense, and a team that should, in general, be elite or near elite. The offensive line wasn't elite last year, which was in my preview of the Pac-12 last year. I sort of hinted that it might be a down year for the offensive line, but 4 starters are back, and they've also got a great recruiting class of blockers. So the offensive line, I'm expecting to be one of the best that Stanford has ever had, or at least to be at the elite level of Stanford offensive lines that we've come to see from them in most seasons, and defense should be strong as well. There's some questions at quarterback. It's not exactly clear what they're going to get from quarterback, and of course the loss of McCaffrey is a hit to the offense as well. But in general, 8 starters return on both sides of the ball. The offensive line and should be solid. The secondary is deep and talented, and I think that Stanford should be very good this year. The question is really just what's going to happen at quarterback. So what I'm looking for to start is I'm definitely looking for unders, at least in the early going. And as far as ATS prospects for them, not exactly sure. We might look for them some of the old Stanford trends and tendencies that we've seen from them, covering when they're underdogs and ATS losses when they're a big favorite. But in general, we'll see how high the market is on them. In general, though, I'm going to be looking for unders to start the year with Stanford. Again, expecting a very, very strong defense and a little bit of a more conservative offense than what we saw last year and in recent years with McCaffrey. Then we've got Washington, and of course Washington is coming off of their awesome season. Not a shock at all that Chris Peterson was able to turn this program around in a major way, given a few years. And what to expect from Washington here? Well, first of all, the expectations obviously are going to be high, so you're going to see all of their opening spreads bumped up a bit more than what we saw from them last year for sure. So it's going to be a bit harder for them to cover spreads overall than it has been recently. But Chris Peterson teams, when he was coaching Boise State, they were teams that were very consistent and reliable, especially against the mid-range and the lower range teams that they played. This year, everyone comes back on offense except for John Ross, which is a big loss, but they should still be strong on offense, returning literally almost everyone else. And the big loss for Washington is a bunch of guys in the secondary. They lose a huge amount of production in the secondary. Still, though, Peterson again has a great track record of replacing replacing whatever talent he loses and plugging holes as necessary, at least if not on the elite level, at the level just below elite. So Washington should again be good. The question is how good of a bet will they be now that expectations are very high. I'm guessing that we might see some unders from them because, again, I do believe the defense should be as awesome as it was last year. The offense might lose a step with no home run hitter like John Ross. So we'll see. And they have a two-headed monster at running back that they're probably going to utilize a lot, which again will suppress scoring just a bit. So I'm thinking about unders, and in general, I'm thinking that Washington, as with years past, should dominate the mid-range teams and the weak teams that they play. So they might be a good bet, even as a huge favorite against the mid-range teams and the lower-range teams. Then when they step up against the truly elite teams in the top 10 or top 15, they tend to have a lot of problems offensively against those kinds of teams. So I would look for them to maybe be a good ATS fade against the elite teams and to go under in against those teams as well, which we did see last season when they stepped up against elite competition. They tended to have trouble offensively, and those games went under. So I would look for that once again this year. I'd look for unders when Washington plays elite teams, maybe overs against everyone else, and look for them to continue to cover against the mediocre teams that they play, even though the lines will be bumped up a bit as well. Next, we have Washington State, and Washington State is looking, of course, they've been excellent in recent years and a great bet in recent years, and it's looking like once again a great version of Washington State, if not the Mike Leach's best team at Washington State, pretty close to it. Their big weakness is pass defense, right? Their defense was actually pretty great against the run last season, and of course they have the offense that does what it does very effectively every year, and having quarterback Luke Falk back and with all the weapons that he needs bodes very well for their offense. The question to the secondary is the big question mark for this team. And they just lost half of its two deep. They're coming off a season where they were the weakness of the team in general as well. So I'm expecting roughly the same from Washington State. I would look them to struggle against good passing teams, maybe give up a bunch of points, maybe be good ATS fades, and look for overs against good passing teams, but against other teams that aren't as good passing and are going to need to run more against Washington State, to look for maybe unders against those kinds of teams and look for ATS covers. But again, Washington State overall is probably going to be a good bet unless the market makes a big adjustment with them, which is possible, but I'd say it's probably not that likely, and I would look for them in general to be a good bet, except for against teams that are very good passing teams, which once again might be the kind of team that can absolutely obliterate them on defense. And next, we've got the two Arizona teams. We'll start with the Arizona Wildcats, and this is looking like a disaster season in the making. And I read one preview of Arizona that put it in a funny way. It said the Arizona Wildcats are checking every box on the program collapse checklist. Ouch. That is harsh and also looking very accurate. They had a ton of decommitments, coaching changes that aren't working out, and their recruiting is just not going well at all. It's just looking like, and just getting blowout losses on the field. It's looking like a disaster in the making. Of course, there's some positive signs. Things could be better than expected for Arizona, and they'll probably get a couple of unexpected outright wins as an underdog throughout the course of the season. They may have a good running game, but in general, this is looking like a very, very weak team. Their defense has just been miserable for 2 years in a row, and they don't have much experience in the front six, and it's just looking like improvements might not even be possible with Arizona's defense. So it's looking like the defense is going to get gashed again. Their strength, I guess, is with their offense. They're going to be productive offensively at times. So I would look for maybe some overs with Arizona, but definitely against teams that are motivated to blow them out. Look for Arizona to lose ATS against maybe even mid-range teams that are motivated to blow them out, but not necessarily being given a big favorite spread because they are mid-range teams. But I would definitely be looking in general to fade Arizona and maybe some overs with them as well. Looking like a disaster in the making for Arizona. And then with Arizona State, I think they have kind of a similar profile, a team that I'm looking to fade, a team that's going to be very vulnerable on defense, especially against anyone with a good passing game. Some positives on offense, so they might be able to put up some points at times. And there's a lot of cute quarterbacks in the mix who could see significant playing time. So there's probably going to be some uncertainty, at least to start the year, at quarterback and offensively for Arizona State. They might gel a lot more at the end of the year offensively. I know that they're planning on passing more this year, so maybe we'll see some overs. They're still going to be very vulnerable in the secondary. Last year they had massive breakdowns in the secondary, and it's looking like there's going to be more of the same on that front this upcoming season. And they're probably going to make improvements defensively in 2018, 2019. This year, though, it's looking like they just don't have the personnel to get it done. The offensive line was awful last year, but they're probably going to improve this season. And again, if they pass more and they find a quarterback who has some ability and can work within the system that they implement, they might see some offensive improvement later in the year. So maybe they'll get a little bit better ATS later on in the year, and for sure they're going to win a couple of upset games. That's always the case with these teams from Arizona. But in general, looking to fade Arizona State and also look for overs with them, and look for them to particularly struggle against anyone with a good passing game, as they did last season. And then Colorado. Colorado is a very interesting team, of course, coming off of a great season, and they return a lot of strength on offense, but they lose a ton from defense, which was, of course, their big strength last season. So the question is, how much of a step back is the defense going to take this year? Is it just going to be a small step back, possibly a big step back? And that's not entirely clear, but it's almost guaranteed that they're going to take us, not about 100% guaranteed, but very likely that they're going to take at least a small step back on defense. There have been some reports from spring that the secondary is looking great, but take that with a grain of salt. I think for sure, at least early on, they're going to struggle against the strong offenses that they face. So I'm going to be looking for overs with Colorado. Their offense, Steve Montez came through last year in a nice way, and they returned all of their skill players from last season. So I'm expecting their offense to be more dynamic and more productive this season. Defense take a step back, so I'm going to be looking to start the year looking for overs with Colorado games. And as far as ATS, not exactly sure where their level of play will fall and how the market will price them. But in general, I would look for Colorado to continue to be good or great against teams that they can run on, and to struggle ATS-wise against teams that can hold them under 100 yards rushing. That's been the profile of this team for the past bunch of years, and that might continue this year. Again, though, it's not exactly clear how much of a step forward their passing game will make. They might be a great team to bet on when they're going up against teams that are vulnerable against the pass. There are a bunch of those in the Pac-12, so I'm not exactly sure what to expect from Colorado ATS-wise, but I'm definitely looking to start the year for overs from them. And then USC, I don't think I'm going to go too in-depth with USC, and that's because you might be able to summarize USC's upcoming expectations this year in one word, and that word is awesome. USC is looking really, really strong this year. Of course, they closed the season great last year when Sam Darnold took over at quarterback, and I've seen a bunch of advanced analytics and statistics that suggest that USC is likely to be even better this year than they were overall last year, and even better than they were in the second part of the season when they started to really pick things up. Clay Helton, I think, is a good style of coach for USC. He's specifically not flashy, maybe not the greatest coach they can find, but he's solid and reliable. And Sam Darnold, assuming Sam Darnold is as great as he was last year, which I think is a fair assumption, and of course the key that he stays healthy, which is always a question whenever you have an elite quarterback leading a team as Darnold is. It's if he gets injured, all bets are off, and it's a different situation entirely. But assuming that Darnold stays healthy, USC is probably going to be even better than they were last year. The pass rush has to be better, but that might happen. And the offensive line, they do lose three big guys on the offensive line, and they're going to have to protect Sam Darnold. But if they can, USC is looking great. If the offensive line falters in a majorly unexpected way, that will definitely throw a monkey wrench into USC's overall plans. But in general, I'm looking for USC to be awesome awesome and to maybe even be a good bet, despite the fact that expectations, of course, are going to be very high for them this season. As far as totals are concerned, maybe a shot with unders, because they do look like they might be a little bit lacking in terms of big play explosiveness, and they might be a little bit conservative in the middle parts of the season. So, and the defense should be excellent and awesome. And the teams they're playing are probably going to try to, as big underdogs, shorten the games to try to stay as close as they can. So maybe look for unders actually with USC, and also look for them to be maybe even good bets against the spread, even as a big favorite. And then UCLA, it's a little hard to say what to expect from UCLA this upcoming season. They have some uncertainties, and they have a lot of major positives and things that look promising, and also some things that are obviously very negative and are going to have to improve majorly from last year. On the positive side, of course, they have Josh Rosen at quarterback, NFL prospect, and if he stays healthy, that's going to be a major positive for them all season long. And then defensively, they might have it's possible they could have one of the strongest defenses in the country. They're too deep on defense, is looking very, very strong, and a lot of that is because of some young guys that might not produce immediately, but if they do, their defense might be very, very strong to start the year and for the whole season through. The big negative for UCLA, of course, is their running game. Last year, their running game was absolutely, completely horrific, embarrassingly bad for a team in the Pac-12, and it's got to improve this year, because there's really, literally only one way to go but up, but it still might be awful enough to make them to be a serious knock on them overall. And they're returning a lot of the same guys that produced the terrible running game from last year. So the question is that a good thing or a bad thing? Most of the time, returning talent is a very good thing in college football. But when you're returning talent from a unit that was that bad last year, it might not quite be as good of a thing as it would be with other teams. So the running game probably going to be a big weakness again. Exactly how weak will it be is a question, and that'll probably be a big factor in determining UCLA's success this year. But the defense should be very good, and Josh Rosen, as long as he's healthy, should also be very good. So it's a little bit hard to say what to expect from UCLA. A good team, but concerns. But to start the year, I guess I might maybe be looking for some unders in light of how good the defense will be, and I might also look for maybe some ATS losses, maybe look for them to be a little bit overvalued, especially if the offense stagnates in the early going, which is possible, and if the offense starts to gel, maybe look for them to cash ATS in the second part of the season. But as of right now, I have no clear ways that I'm leaning towards UCLA. There's a lot of big positives, some big negatives, and some uncertainty as far as how things are going to shake out and how the market will price them. And then we have Utah, and Utah is another interesting program. The coach Whittingham is great at making his teams overachieve, and they have outperformed their statistical projections each of the past 3 seasons. I think long term we're going to expect more of the same from Utah, but I am going to predict and look for some significant regression from Utah in the early part of the upcoming season. They lose a lot in their receiving core. They're at the same time that they're trying to be supposedly passing more with their offensive schemes. So they lose 3 of their top 4 targets at receiver at the same time that they're implementing a new offense, and they also lose a bunch of talent in the secondary. So those 2 things combined, I think, bode badly for Utah, at least to start the season. Things again might take a turn in the middle or late part of the season. That would not at all be a surprise, considering what a good coach Whittingham is in general. But to start the year, I'm looking for Utah to actually have a regression in the first 1 or 2 parts of the season, and I'm going to actually look for Utah to be a good fade, to be a good bet against in the early going in the upcoming season. Now, those are my initial thoughts for the Pac-12 for the upcoming 2017 college football season.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to our channel. Now, we've put a lot of work into producing all these free videos, so please help us out and keep all our content free for you forever by simply liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing. Now, not to mention, a visit to our industry-leading website will warm the hearts of all our SBR employees, especially myself. Now, the links are over there to the left, so do check those out. Thanks for watching.